pay close attention because you need to understand how the math works before you can use any type of calculator or software. Because if you don't understand how the math works, then you don't know how to input the data.
That's why we start with the fix and flip strategy, because if you can get these spreads in your deals, no matter what your exit strategy is after that, it's gonna work.
Welcome back, guys, to video 4 in this special masterclass series that I'm doing with Tony Mont. Tony, this is gonna be fun because we got the whiteboard, guys. This is where stuff gets real. We're gonna actually be breaking down the numbers. And on this particular video in the series, we're gonna be talking about our very first exit strategy that we're gonna focus on out of a whole slew of different exit strategies. And what's great about this one and why we wanted to start here, and Tony, appreciate your insight on this, is we're gonna start with the exit strategy where you have to buy the deepest.
You're right.
And very strategically for a reason, because when you go into this business, you want to anchor with your seller at the lowest price. And Tony brings up a great point. If ever you get a deal at the lowest price for the lowest exit, right? So the exit that requires the lowest price, then everything after that's upside. So if that doesn't work, or if you get it at that, you got all these other ways to monetize that, that exit.
Yeah, that's why we start with the fix and flip exit strategy first, because this is the lowest point in which you anchor the seller. And if they say yes to that offer, great. It's good for a fix and flip formula, a fix and flip investor to exit with that, or it's good for a buy and hold or any other strategy, novations or finding a cash end buyer, all the other stuff we're going to talk about in all the other videos. This works. So we always start here.
Yeah. And remember, guys, you really have 3 different buyers, multiple strategies, but 3 different buyers. You have a flipper and they're going to add value and resell it. You have a buy and hold investor. They're going to keep it for cash flow. And you have a homeowner, an end buyer, homeowner, or retail buyer. Right. Those are your 3 different buyers. Now, again, there's multiple ways and layers of each of those and strategies for each of those, which we're going to get into. But the flipper is the lowest because the flipper is adding value. They're coming in and they're doing a renovation, which means we need to get it low enough to where they have room to buy it, add value by renovating it, and then resell it at market value. So that's why that's the lowest price we have to pay to meet their formula with a flipper.
And we're going off of the ARV or the after repair value. So when we're looking at properties that have been flipped, even if ours is in livable shape and it's rent ready, however we call it, where it's a nice house, it's just dated, we still have to redo the kitchen, redo the bathrooms, and redo the flooring and do the paint and do all the things we have to do to get it up to that ARV because of the comps we're using, the flips we're using for our comps to come up with that number. That's why these offers are always going to be low, because if the property's worth a certain amount as is, we're still going to have to get it much cheaper, because even though it's livable and its current market value is higher, we have to change everything in order to get more value on the back end as a flipper.
Yes, and that's why everything starts with the flipper with ARV. After repair value. That's the price the home will sell up once it's been renovated. So that's the highest price the market will pay, because the market will pay for brand new fixed up homes the highest price.
Right.
So we're not concerned about, with a flipper, we're not concerned about, well, what's its value in its current condition. We're concerned about what's its potential future or after repair value.
Yeah,
that's this number here.
And that's the most important one. We're going to find the after repair value with the other flip comps that we see in the area, which you can use a lot of different platforms. Zillow's a free one, where you're looking at properties that have recently been flipped. They're pretty easy to spot when you're looking at comps because they have all the current design to them. Like you can see a flip easy if you're running comps all the time because of the grays and the gray floorings and the whites and the granite countertops and that kind of thing.
3 things you look for. Is it newly renovated? Is it vacant? Because a flipper, it's going to be vacant. And then the third one's optional, is staged. Some of them are staged, some of them aren't. But you can look at a set of pictures and you're like, that's a rehab. It's all updated. It's vacant, meaning there's no homeowner stuff. There's no clothes in the closet. And it's staged, or it might just be all empty, but a lot of times it's staged.
Yeah, they'll digitally stage it too, or they'll actually stage it. And another way, if you're just looking at data, is it was bought at a low price and sold or listed at a high price, right? So the data's there, but visually we can see it on Zillow because of the photos.
Yeah, now what are some best practices to comp a property? We call it comping, which is finding relevant data that supports your after repair value, what are some general rules of like what we look for in comps?
Yeah, we're going to look for something very similar, bed and bath count, square footage count. Obviously, there's going to be a little variables there, a couple hundred square feet each way. Bed and bath should be pretty spot on in the neighborhood. You should be able to find that. Year build, lot size is something we look at, and style of house. You know, you can't really comp a brick ranch against a 2-story house. It's not apples to apples at that point, right? There's going to be some variables.
Yes, you got features, and then you also got distance. So you want to stay in the same neighborhood. Sometimes we use like a half-mile rule, but even a half mile, if you're leaving the neighborhood, you're crossing major roads, that could change the neighborhood, right? So we look at features, we look at distance from your subject property, and we look at time, how old it is. And right now, I think 6 months is usually pretty safe if you're looking at homes that sold in the past 6 months. Sometimes we can go, depending on the market, we can go back a little further. Sometimes we shorten it up even to 3 months. I remember when the interest rates jumped up real fast, we were using real tight data, like 3 months.
And on the back end, when the interest rates increased so much, now we're looking at, all right, if something sold 6 months ago, then they had this under contract, 7, 8 months ago. What were interest rates then?
Yeah.
So we were looking at really what the current market was telling us. And for a while there, we were specifically using for sale and pending data, which is our most current data. So I would say, start at 90 days, 6 months on sold, and really look at your for sale data and what is pending, and what percentage of the properties are pending on the MLS that are for sale. If it's an area that has 30 properties for sale and only 2 are pending, now you know, all right, I'm gonna have to get this pretty cheap for it to be attractive for an investor. If there's 30 properties for sale and 20 of them are pending, you're like, all right, this is a hot area. I don't have to get as deep on this one probably because there's a lot of competition. They know they're going to sell it right away.
Days on market too, are those active? If those days on market are really long, then that means stuff's sitting for a long time. And so again, just real high level, guys, you want to look at, is it similar to your subject property? Is it close in proximity? And is it recently sold? Those are the 3 main components you look at when you comp a property. So, and guys, I do a lot of content. I know you do. Like, learning how to comp a property is an acquired skill that takes practice because there's some science to it and there's also an art to it. Like you're going to start to learn how to see things that just come with experience and practice. So you definitely, though, learning ARV is just investing in your market and it's investing in your skill set as an investor. So just take the time to really learn how to comp well.
Yep. And I'll throw one little nugget in there for everybody. Something I do when I run comps on Zillow is I always look at a satellite view of the neighborhood because that'll tell you a lot about that property, even looking at a street view, because then you can see, is the neighbor's house burned to the ground? And is that going to affect us? Is the neighbor's house or yard look like a junkyard?
Is it backed up to a commercial?
Is it backed up commercial? Is there power lines that run through the backyard? Or on a positive note, are there other houses on that block that look flipped and well manicured and it's a good area? So you can see a lot from a satellite view.
Definitely. Okay, so we're going to start with our after repair value. And guys, by the way, we're going to break this all down on the whiteboard manually and show you how we get to these numbers. But I've got a free deal analyzer software. You just go to mydealanalyzer.com and you can actually just plug these numbers in and it'll do the math for you. It'll track all your stuff. You can save it by address. It's really cool. So you could use that as a tool to do this. But don't pay close attention because you need to understand how the math works before you can use any type of calculator or software. Because if you don't understand how the math works, then you don't know how to input the data.
Yeah,
right.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So learn the data. We're going to do it long form right now and break it down for you. Again, to understand how we bring a property with an exit to a flipper. Whether you're the flipper or you're going to wholesale it to a flipper, you need to understand how the flipper looks at a deal. Exactly.
So like we said before, ARV is definitely the most important number in this equation because that's what we're starting with. If your ARV is off, all your numbers are going to be off. So we start with ARV on our subject property. It's $250,000 for ARV. That's what we found while we were running our comps. And then there's a soft cost to the wholesale deal. So that's going to be your commissions, your closing costs, any financing your flipper is going to be using, and their profit in the deal. So how much money is in the deal for your investor?
And just to give you a reference point, you know, if you look at 0.75, what that means is it means you're taking 25% off the top.
Yep.
So where's that 25% going? Roughly, it's going to about 9% of ARV is going to commissions and closing costs. Now, it could be 8 or 7, but like roughly 9. About 6% of ARV is going towards your carrying costs. Most flippers are financing their deals. That means they're paying interest to a lender, right? So about 6% of that. And then that gives you about 10% left to go towards your profit. Now, again, those could vary a little bit because maybe they're self-funding or whatever. But if you add this up, that comes to 25%, 9, 6, and 10. And that gets you to that 75% number off of ARV. Does that make sense? So just to give you kind of a little bit of context, these soft costs, these are fairly fixed, right? Like those are numbers that have to come off. Every single flipper has to pay closing fees, has to pay commissions, has financing, and wants to make a profit.
Right. And these are commissions and closing costs also on the flip. Like we talk about, they are paying closing costs on the assignment contract, on the buy. But, you know, now they're, you know, if you look at the exit strategy from your flipper, they're absolutely going to have to list this. They're going to have to pay commissions. They're going to have to pay closing costs. And like you said, most of them use financing for these flips.
Yeah.
So for every $100 they're going to spend on this deal, they're going to get $10 back. They're going to make 10% on their money in this scenario, which is great, right? Yep. That's a good profit for a flipper.
You're going to talk in a minute about how this number could change based on the area and things like that. So we'll get down to that in a minute. But as a general rule, at least for this formula, we're going with 75% of ARV.
Right. And then, you know, we're chopping down this ARV as we go through this equation. Again, just like Jerry said, 75% is not just a blanket formula across the board. We just happen to use it in this scenario. But we're going to explain to you guys in your markets how you figure out what type of discount your flipper needs in order to make it a good deal for them. So in this scenario, $250, we're going to leave 25% gross profit in for the flipper, and a typical rehab, $40,000 is what we came up with. That's going to be variable too. So after the soft costs and the rehab, we now know this is a good deal to our investor, our flipper, at $147,500, right? So now that we have this number, and again, your rehab is going to depend on, you know, the condition of the property, right? So make sure you're comparing apples to apples on your subject property and the comp you're using for this 250. If your property that you are trying to get under contract is a nice, clean property and it's in livable shape, that doesn't mean your rehab's only 10 grand. Look and see, did the property that sold for 250, did they replace the cabinets, countertops? Did they take any walls down? Did they put recessed lighting in? What do the floors look like? Appliances, roof, HVAC, windows, all those things come into play on your rehab. So pay attention to that. So we know we can sell this deal for $147,500 to our investor. So we're going to start with that price in mind for our offer. Now, it depends how much you want to make on your assignment fee. In our office, we start our first offer, which usually should offend the seller, at $40,000 less than our exit price. That'll give us an assignment fee of $40,000 after we lock it up and then dispo the deal. So we always want to have a range, though. So if we're starting at 40, we know not every seller is going to say yes to that number, but we want a range of 40 to 20. And the reason we end at 20,000 is because there are some variables in there. We have not gotten inspection done on this property. Most of the time we haven't even seen photos of it. So this could vary $10,000, you know, front or back, either for the good or the bad. And we want at least some money in this deal so we're not wasting our time. So we like to have a $20,000 spread at the very minimum to then wholesale a deal, because, you know, big deals get smaller and small deals go away in wholesaling. There's a lot of issues we run into on the exit. So
at 40, you would be at a 107, right? Because you take 40 off of the flipper's buy. So if you take 40 off of 147, that puts you at 107.5 as your anchor. This is your starting point.
Yep.
But you've got a little bit of a range here, so you have a little room where you could negotiate and come up if you needed to with that seller.
Right. So you're negotiating, you give that offer of 107,500. Hey, I told you I needed much more than that. I told you I needed 140. I understand that. Let me go back to my underwriters and see if we can inch up on that. And then you inch up to the 127.5 and they feel like they've won because you've come up $20,000. They've come down a little bit, but you met somewhere in the middle and you can still make money on this deal.
Yeah.
Right? So the variable we were talking about up here was this 25% spread gross profit we left in there for our buyer. Now, that's not going to be a blanket formula across the board. I look at that number in different classes of markets and over under on the ARV or the exit, the 200. We use $200,000 in our office
as a cutoff point.
As a cutoff point, because if you look at the profits a buyer, a flipper can make, the higher the ARV is on that deal, the more money they're going to make. So the percentages here get a little off, right? They don't need to make as much gross profit on something that's $250,000 as they would on a property that's $100,000. So that does get adjusted by about 5%. So our Class A markets are markets like Raleigh. We were just talking about Raleigh in a previous video where it's a really hot market. Even in our current climate where interest rates are high, still a lot of people moving into Raleigh, North Carolina. I will call that a Class A market. So anything with an ARV under 200,000, we're going to use 70% in this equation, and anything over 200,000, like this property, we're going to use 75%. So we're either going to leave 25% margins in there for our investor, or we're going to leave 30% in there for our investor.
So if this number was 150 and it was in Raleigh, you would be going with 70% instead of 75%.
Right, which leaves now 30% gross profit instead of 25% gross profit. Now the Class B is like my favorite market because it's a good market that is usually good for flips and rentals. There's usually a couple exit strategies in these markets because I'll just keep it to North Carolina. A Class B market to me in North Carolina is a place like Fayetteville, where you can still get into really nice homes for under 200,000 that people are flipping, but it's also a really good buy and hold market. There's a military base there. Rents are high. Purchase price is low. There's a little distress, but not so much where it's a nightmare, right? There's still good neighborhoods, a low level of distress. But, everybody that is locking up deals is in these Class A markets. So if you guys are looking at what markets to jump into, I would look at Class B markets. There's a little less competition in there, and there's multiple exit strategies in those markets. I really like them. And in a Class B market, same thing. We're using the over-under on the $200,000 ARV. If it's over 200,000, we'll have a 70% calculation in our ARV, leaving 30% for our investor. And if it's under 200,000, we're going to be at 65. So we're leaving 35% in there for our investor. But like I said, we'll go into it on a later video on why these are really good buy and hold properties and how we can exit to a buy and hold or a BRRRR investor.
Yeah, remember guys, we're talking just about the formula to a flipper. So what Tony's saying is he's saying some of these might fit both. It might be great for a flipper, or a buy and hold might want it too. And if you don't have context around that, watch one of our previous videos where we really talked about the different mindsets and different ways of looking at deals as a flipper versus a buy and hold investor.
Exactly. And then our Class C markets, these are going to be our most distressed markets. A couple come to mind. There's definitely some Class C areas in Memphis, Tennessee, Toledo, Ohio, Detroit,
Cleveland,
Baltimore. Yeah, there's some real Class C markets that you can make a lot of money in off-market properties as a wholesaler, as a flipper, as a buy and hold person. But we're specifically talking about flipping here. We're going to have to get these the most discounted because there's so much distress in these markets. There's too much opportunity for our investors out there. And they're going to pass up on your deal if you're not if you don't run your calculations right, because they know in a few days or a week or a month, a better deal is going to come their way, because there's so much distress and there's so much motivation that they can get really good deals in these markets.
And these tend to be lower income, which means there's more challenges, there's more difficulty. You need a bigger percentage because you need that room there to still make a decent profit because it's a lower price typically.
There's longer hold times on the market. A lot goes
Contractors is more difficult. Everything's just harder, and you would think it wouldn't be this way, but the lower the price point, actually the more difficult it is to be successful as a flipper.
Yes.
Whereas the higher up you go, the easier it is because you're in nicer markets.
Right. Yeah, with better buyers and all that. So in our Class C, we still keep breaking it down. You're not going to get a lot of stuff over 200 in these Class Cs, but if you do 65, under 200, we're going to be around that 55%. So you're leaving a huge margin in there for your buyers, but this is very apparent when you're in these Class C areas. And if you're not used to being in such a distressed neighborhood and locking up a deal, you're going to think you just won the lottery getting a deal at 70% or 65% of ARV minus repairs. And then you start talking to your buyers and they're like, this is way overpriced for this area.
Yeah.
This is a high crime area. I need to almost steal this thing in order to flip it because I know the challenges that come from flipping in this area.
Yeah, you're mostly going to be kind of falling into this category here. And there's going to be a lot fewer of them. There's not as many flippers that are doing Class C under 200,000. There's just, you're probably going to be shifting over to a buy and hold.
Right, which will go
But there are some. I mean, there are some, and you want to be able to look at a deal and break it down appropriately.
Well, and like we said in the previous video, if you can get this Class C at the 55% ARV minus rehab,
it's all up from there.
It's all up from there. Because say you can't find a flipper that's flipping in this rough area, you've locked it up so low you can't lose on it, right? You could either take it down yourself, list it, you could flip it yourself, you could sell it to a buy and hold investor. So that's why we start with the fix and flip strategy, because if you can get these spreads in your deals, no matter what your exit strategy is after that, it's gonna work. So we wanna anchor our sellers with these numbers, and we only come off these numbers if we can't negotiate it between that $40,000 and $20,000 for our assignment fee. Then we start going to another exit strategy and we start running different numbers on it to see if we can come up with an offer that works for the seller.
Yeah, that's great. So hopefully guys, to me, this was like the most clear explanation of how to run numbers on a deal where the exit is a fix and flipper. And whether you're the flipper or you're going to take it to a flipper, the only difference would be if you're going to wholesale it is this part right here, right? Where you're going to then build in your discount.
Yeah, if you're just going to buy this thing, now you know it's a good deal at the 147.5, right? You don't have to have an assignment fee, but if you can negotiate that, that's more money in your pocket if you want to flip it anyway. So it's a very powerful formula. And I think it's kind of a generic formula a lot of people use in wholesaling, which is why I like talking about it, because I don't see a lot of people who teach this formula that really break it down and explain to you, especially this percentage, because people will say, yeah, I do everything at 70% ARV. And then you say, well, why do you do that? They don't understand that there's a lot of costs in here. And I look at everything as like a gross profit. You broke it down nicely with what comes out of that profit to then make it a net profit of 10% on this. But you guys need to realize and look in the eyes of your buyers and realize what's coming out of that deal and why they need them discounted. They not only pay both sides of closing costs on our buy on the assignment contract, but now they're paying commissions and closing costs on the flip,
on the resale.
Once they list it with a realtor. They, most of the time, even my biggest buyers that do 100 flips a year are using financing for it. Like, not everybody flips with cash. Most use financing. So taking the finance portion out of it and then leaving that profit in there for them, it's important to know that, and it's important to know what market you guys are in. And if you guys are wondering, I don't know if I'm a Class B or C or A, I'm kind of confused. How do I find this out? Ask your buyers. Your buyers are going to tell you what they buy at, and kind of rule of thumb. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but in a place like Raleigh, people are going to say, yeah, I'm 70, 75%. they're buying at 80%.
Yeah.
So they're always gonna fluff the numbers a little bit to their benefit. But, you know, just keep that data in your buyers list and know what your market is telling you, what your buyers are telling you, so you know you can lock up a deal low enough where it makes sense for them, you, and hopefully the seller.
Yeah, one final thought I'll add to this rolling percentage here is, you know, every market's going to have an outlier, right? Like there might be someone in the market that pays 80 because he's got cheap financing, or he's a do-it-yourselfer. Maybe he's got his own crew and he can save on some money. So even though we're trying to find a ballpark based on these classes, just know that there's a little bit of a range there as well, up or down. But what you want to do is you want to try to identify, well, what's the overarching trend? Like, what are most buyers paying? What percentage do they want to be into deals? And there's only one way to really know that, and it shifts and changes all the time, is staying close to the market. And that's why you want to really be your Dispo team and your acquisitions team. And if you're a one-man show, it's easy. You're both, right? But as you start to build a business, your Dispo has to stay close to acquisitions, because you need to be communicating constantly to acquisitions. Hey, this is what we're hearing on the streets. We're hearing that we're at a 70%. When interest rates went up real quick, it was interesting because cash buyers instantly dropped.
Yes.
But sellers were really slow because they're slow to react. Investors are fast to react. And so we had a little window there where like we were sort of like way over contracting because we were going off of numbers we were used to. Then we take it over to Dispo, and all of a sudden the cash buyers all adjusted really quickly.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh crap, we over contracted. And so we were trying to like quickly readjust everything.
Yes.
And the fastest way we adjusted was like talking to everybody. Okay, where are you at now? Where are you at now? Where are you at now? Okay, great. Now we got to get that information back to acquisitions so that we're using the right formulas to then contract.
Right, exactly. And then because of that market shift and the interest rates going up, we came with another exit strategy that we use a lot, that me and you have talked about a lot on previous videos, that we're going to talk about later in these videos as well, which is utilizing the MLS for not only novations, but also wholesale deals, right?
Yeah, great. So guys, this is the bottom where you're going to buy the deepest. The reason why you want to know this first is typically when you're negotiating with a seller, you're going to have to create some sort of a starting point. And you want that starting point to be your very best deal, which is your lowest offer. And then from there, you're going to try to uncover more information and see if either the seller situation means you need to do a different strategy, or if the market can provide you another exit strategy that will allow you to go up from there.
Exactly.
But we never go into the deal saying, okay, well, how do I find one of these higher paying exits and start there? We almost always start at your rock bottom low price.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is your anchor, just like we talked about.
If you get it for that, it's everything else.
Everything's on the upside. And if you don't get it for that, now you have room to negotiate, and you're going to have other options for an exit strategy. Yep.
All right, guys, leave a comment. Let us know if you found this really helpful, this breakdown. Again, to get a really nice calculator that does all this math for you, you just input the values and it'll spit out your outputs. You can get that for free. Just go to mydealanalyzer.com and you can download that. And by the way, guys, we're going to put some information in the description as well where you can learn more from Tony. Tony's a guest here on the channel. I'm really appreciative of him. But he's got some training he does on Dispo. He has a community where he works directly with you on live calls and training on how this all works. And we'll put your social in there as well so you guys can learn and follow Tony as well. And leave a comment and say, Tony, you're a flipping genius. Thank you for breaking this down. And guys, we'll see you on the next video.